Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm host, as always, Nathan, and today I am coming at you with everything that you need to know about just about every coach on the Michigan staff. We're going to go person by person, spot by spot, giving you a background, a breakdown, and a grade for each and every coach that Kyle Whittingham has hired so far, with all the major positions and a few minor positions that I would like to talk about as well, all filled up here. I am going to go through and give you my opinions on every single coach. But before I do that, I am going to ask you to like the video and subscribe. Go ahead and help me to get to 900 subscribers. We're currently at 830, so go ahead and subscribe to help me get to 900 subscribers. And you go ahead and tell me what you think of the coaching staff down below in the comment section. Just remember to keep it civil, because after all, what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And now, with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by starting with the big man himself, Kyle Whittingham. So before we actually get into Kyle Whittingham, I do have to take a moment here to do some housekeeping. Okay. This video was recorded over several different days. You're going to see me with a couple of different shirts on. Okay. So if the flow and kind of continuity of this video is a little bit off, that's why. Um, Especially because with the developments in the portal that have happened to this point, today being very late Wednesday night of the 7th. Okay. So with all of that kind of stuff, I don't really mention it in this video. Uh, I am going to re-record the offensive line segment because that was where the majority of this has happened. But Jordan Marshall announcing that he's coming back is not something I talk about in the running back section of this video. So yeah, okay. Just real quick, some housekeeping type stuff that I wanted to interject here before I talk about Kyle Whittingham as the head coach of University of Michigan. Okay, so quick background on Kyle Whittingham as a head coach. He took over from Urban Meyer in 2005 when Urban Meyer left to go to Florida and then went on to win multiple national championships at Florida. Okay, so he's been at Florida for 21 years. He's been at Florida. He's been at Utah for 21 years. He's been the head coach at Utah for 21 years. They've won a lot of games. They've won 2 Pac-12 championships in the past 5 years. Okay, now it was 5 and 4 years ago, but doesn't matter. All of that aside, this is a proven winner who develops talent at a high level and is what I like to call the CEO type of head coach. All right. He doesn't call plays, offense or defense. He is a defensive coach. Okay. He was the defensive coordinator for Urban Meyer when Urban Meyer was at Utah. All right. So he is a defensive minded head coach, and his defenses have consistently been very good. He's had some elite defenses here and there, but not consistently elite. He's usually very good to great at the defensive level. Okay. So that's one aspect of this. The defense, I think, is going to be very, very good. The offense, I think, with the offensive play caller and specifically the quarterback coach as well, who I'll get into next, I think the offense is going to be very, very good as well. All right. So, as his overarching sort of thing, philosophy, coaching philosophy, you could say, Kyle Whittingham is about development, playing tough defense, running the ball, and having a tough physical football team. Does that sound familiar? Okay. He's effectively Jim Harbaugh West. Okay. He also, I think, has been very, very smart about who he's hiring to be on this staff and who he kept on this staff as well. All right. So in terms of not just in terms of you're keeping the best coaches on the staff, which they're not doing that in my opinion. Okay. If they did that, you would have kept Lamar Morgan. and potentially Brian Jean Mary as well. But that doesn't matter. What I do want to say here is, as far as, which we'll get into the individuals of this when their time comes, but as far as the actual philosophy of putting this coaching staff together, I think it's been brilliant. All right. Genuinely, I think it's been fantastic. He's kept Tony Alford, who's got connections throughout the Midwest and kind of in the DMV area as well. He's at least in Northern Virginia, maybe not the DMV per se, but Northern Virginia as well. He's got a lot of connections there. He's kept Lou Esposito as well, who has not only a ton of connections in the Midwest, but the state of Michigan itself. High school coaches in the state of Michigan love Lou Esposito. So that is a smart move if you want to recruit the state of Michigan, is keeping Lou Esposito around. And then his other retention, being special teams coach Kerry Coombs, is another guy that has a lot of connections with the big time programs, high school programs in the Midwest, and specifically Ohio, where he was a head coach in the state of Ohio for a very, very long time. So he kind of knows everybody. Michigan may or may not be able to make headways into Ohio. They occasionally can. Jordan Marshall, I believe, was from Ohio. But generally speaking, not really. All right. So the actual putting together, the actual architecture of this staff, I understand the philosophy behind it, and I think it's great. I think he is taking a truly national approach with his recruiting potential, because he's never had the ability to do things like he's going to have the ability to do stuff at the University of Michigan. He's never had the resources. He's never had the backing. He's never had the money, not just NIL money, but he's never had the institutional money to pay big time coaches, to keep big time coaches, to do everything that a place like the University of Michigan can do. Because remember, coaches are employees of the school. So the school can just fucking pay them. All right. This isn't where they got to pretend like the players aren't employees of the school to get around NIL so that NIL will work. Okay. This is a very confusing whole situation with that, but we don't need to get into that. Okay. That's maybe a topic for another day. Another final thing I want to talk about with Kyle Whittingham. Okay. Yes, he is old. No, he is not a long-term solution. I think he's probably got 5 years in him, maybe 6 if it goes really, really well. All right. That's just my opinion. I don't have anything to back that up other than he's in his late 60s. Okay. So now he's physically fit and all that. So I'm not like downplaying it. He's in better shape than I am. My fat ass is fat as fuck. He's in way better shape than I am. And he's 3 times my age, but that doesn't mean anything to Nathan. I'm just saying this is probably not a long-term hire. That doesn't matter a whole lot, in my opinion, because there are already several people on this staff that could be considered head coaches in waiting. All right. Which may or may not get touched upon in this video. I don't remember if I talked about it or not. Nevertheless, all of that aside, the last point I want to make about Kyle Whittingham, even though he is old, Kyle Whittingham's recruiting got significantly better in the NIL era, like way fucking better. All right. Not only in terms of the transfer portal, but high school recruiting, in terms of identifying talent, in terms of all of that. It got way better in the NIL era. Okay. So even though he is an older coach and he might not be hip with the times, so to speak, if his time at Utah is any indication of what it's going to be like at Michigan, at least in these past couple of years where NIL has really been a factor, he's going to hit the ground running with this. Okay. Again, probably not this year. We've seen some people come in, but probably not this year. It's mainly going to be keeping the roster together and then going all in for 2027, in my opinion. But the grade for Kyle Whittingham is an A minus. And the reason it's an A minus is because I do have a little bit of question marks in terms of the actual coaching ability of the coaches that he has hired. He's not particularly a long-term guy, and A plus and A is a very high standard. Now you're going to see A's and you're going to see A pluses in this video, but that is a very, very high standard. Okay. When I'm grading things, average is C. So a C plus is slightly above average. A B minus is above average. A B minus is above average. B plus is good. A minus is really good. A is great. A plus is elite. This is a really, really good, maybe great hire if some things break his way, which they may or may not. Now I'm going to go ahead and get into the offensive coordinator hire. And Jason Beck is not only an elite hire, in my opinion, but he's also one of the more interesting stories in terms of the coaching staff and how they sort of came together and stuff like this. So, Jason Beck has spent a lot of time under some pretty good offensive minds and some really good just coaches in general. He's worked with Les Miles. He's worked with obviously Kyle Whittingham, although that was much later in his career. He's worked with Bronco Mendenhall, Robert Anai, a bunch of guys that he has uh, studied under, so to speak. So as far as his timeline as a coach comes, he started off as a graduate assistant at BYU. He then moved on to working, I think, as either just like an offensive analyst or a GA, technically, with LSU under Les Miles. His first full time position, like his first time actually being a full blown position coach, actually came at Weber State, where he coached quarterbacks. And while he was there, he ended up turning that quarterback into the Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year. Now, he wasn't calling plays, okay, but he does have a long history of developing quarterbacks. So I think that probably played into potentially Bryce Underwood coming back. And also potentially Bryce Underwood probably was not going to get more money than what Michigan was giving him on the open market, but that's neither here nor there. He does in fact have a way better history developing quarterbacks than I initially thought he did. It's like way better. Okay. So he is someone that has developed quarterbacks at a high level. The first time he called plays was actually at Simon Fraser University in Canada. Okay. And that allowed him to basically just do whatever the fuck he wanted. Okay. This is something that you see with a lot of older coaches. If you go back, if you look at like Bill Walsh, he was a high school coach for a couple years, or at least 1 year. And if you look, there's a ton of guys that in the older coaching circles, I think Andy Reid even did this. I might be wrong though. A ton of older coaches, they just have a random year where they were like the head coach or the play caller at a random high school or absurdly small college in between stints at bigger colleges or in the NFL. So that was kind of weird to look at, to see that he was calling plays for a Canadian university. Okay. But effectively when you do that, the point of doing that is that you can then experiment with a bunch of, shit. You can do basically whatever you want because there's no real downside to anything. Okay. He then returned to BYU in 2013 as a quarterback coach, where he developed Taysom Hill. Okay. Taysom Hill, superstar Taysom Hill, won many people fantasy championships. I don't play fantasy football. I think it's stupid, but I'm an asshole. Don't listen to me. Okay. But absolute football legend, Taysom Hill, he was his quarterback coach. I didn't know that before this year. And he turned Taysom Hill into an extraordinarily good athlete, from an extraordinarily good athlete into someone who could actually competently play the quarterback role. He was also able to utilize, the athletic traits and stuff like that. So that was really, really cool. He then went to Virginia working as the quarterbacks coach and I think pass game coordinator. And then I think I don't actually think he was calling plays at that point. I think he had to wait until Syracuse before he got his first full blown OC job. But While he was at Virginia under Bronco Mendenhall, he worked with Bryce Perkins, who was another one of these guys who was a pretty good athlete with a solid arm that really just needed to be developed, and he developed him. Bryce Perkins was a really good player there for Virginia. Also worked with Brennan Armstrong when he was lighting up college football in 2021, I think 2020 or 2021, where he led the nation in passing, I believe. Uh, he was the uh, quarterback coach there for him as well. So that was another very interesting thing to discover when looking at all of this. Okay. He then went to Syracuse, I believe, because Bronco Mendenhall got fired. Went to Syracuse as the quarterback coach, took over as offensive coordinator in 2023, and Syracuse went from 108th in passing efficiency to 45th in passing efficiency with him calling plays. That's a massive jump. The quarterback, Garrett Schrader, also looked way fucking better with him from year 1 to year 2. Even you saw the big time jump. So that is, so that was impressive to see as well. He then, of course, the part where most people I think are more familiar with him, he then went to New Mexico, and delivered a extraordinarily good offense at New Mexico for one season, and then this past year was the offensive coordinator at Utah. So Jason Beck has had 4 years total calling plays, but every time he's calling plays, with the exception of the university in Canada, because that's in Canada. Okay. But every time he's calling plays, the offense has gotten way fucking better. Okay. And he's never had talent on the offensive line like this. He's never had talent at the quarterback position like this. He's never had talent at the running back position like this either. Okay. Now, I will also say the running numbers are a little bit inflated because they had a quarterback that could run the ball so effectively at Utah, and at New Mexico. So his rushing offense numbers are a tad bit inflated because some of that, a significant chunk of that, is quarterback scrambles. Okay. But that happens with everybody who has an athletic quarterback that scrambles and runs around and does shit. All right. That's just the reality of the situation. But as far as actually scheming up rushing and stuff like that, probably not 266 yards a game, which is what they averaged this year. Probably more like 220, which is still very good. But the quarterback scrambling and quarterback designed runs, just a little bit of nuance in there where you got to be like, okay, that's a tad bit inflated. But grand scheme of things, they were 5th in scoring. They had an elite offense this year. They were a quality football team, and I could not be happier that Jason Beck is here. This is a fantastic hire. The only reason it's not an A+ is because A, for whatever reason, just feels better for me. All right. So yeah, I just don't think it's gotten, he just doesn't have I guess you could say he just doesn't have the amount of years in the system of being an elite coach and being an elite play caller to get to that A+ level. We're going to see some A+ because this is a very, very good staff. I'd say pretty comfortably a top 20 staff in the country, probably a top 15. I'm a little bit iffy on top 10, but I'd have to sit down and think about it. But Jason Beck is a phenomenal hire. He has a long history of coaching quarterbacks that are not just technically sound, but understand the scheme and execute at a high level. So this is a brilliant hire for Bryce Underwood. This is a fantastic fit because Bryce Underwood is, if he was going to build his perfect quarterback just athletically, it probably would look like Bryce Underwood. All right. That's the reality of the situation. So I am very excited to see what Michigan's offense is going to look like under Jason Beck. Next coach up is the offensive analyst / quarterback coach, Koy Detmer Jr. And Koy Detmer is very young. He is an interesting coach to talk about here a little bit. So he's been effectively with Jason Beck since Jason Beck went to Syracuse, which I believe was 2022. So they've been together for 4 years. All right. And Coy Detmer's role appears to be, in my opinion, it's just me. Coy Detmer's role appears to be the guy who's going to coach the QBs when Jason Beck is out recruiting. So that's a big deal. Okay. So he's effectively an assistant quarterback coach as well as being the offensive analyst. He's also the guy that, aside from helping with like technique and stuff like that with the quarterbacks, he's also the guy that allows them to have the big picture thinking, it appears, in terms of what the offense is doing, how it's operating, why the play call is like this, how you should read it, what you should expect to happen, all that kind of stuff. The big picture stuff appears to be the his main focus, as well as mechanics and stuff like that. Which is something in my Bryce Underwood video, if I ever fucking make it, I will talk about, because Bryce Underwood is raw as fuck at the quarterback position. He throws off his back foot a lot. He's effectively a thrower, not a passer right now, is a good way to put it. So having somebody who has had a pretty good career, even though it's short, he's only been coaching for 6 years, I believe. He was at Texas A&M Kingsville, and where he was like a GA, and then he coached running backs, I think, and then he moved to Syracuse, where he was just a GA, I think, or an offensive analyst, I think, and then he followed Jason Beck to New Mexico, followed him to Utah, and then now is at Michigan. Okay, so this is a guy that it feels appears to be very important to Jason Beck's implementation of his scheme, as well as the bigger picture kind of stuff. So his ability to coach technique to quarterbacks is very valuable, but I think his ability to get quarterbacks to understand the big picture and the offense itself is a bigger asset, so to speak, because Jason Beck has also shown to be a very, very good technical QB coach as well. So I'm hoping, with the amount of talent we have in the quarterback room, you'd be able to put together a quarterback that is well coached, understands the offense, and can operate it as a at a high level. All right. So that is Coy Detmer Jr., the offensive analyst slash quarterback coach. I do not believe he will be recruiting. Okay. So you can only have 10 people be recruiters. I don't know if that includes the head coach or not. But you can only have 10 designated staff members as off-campus recruiters. I do not believe Coy Detmer will be one of them. I do think Jason Beck is one of them, though. I did not mention that in the Jason Beck part, and I should have. Up next, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Alford, the best running back coach in college football, in my opinion. Elite recruiter, elite developer, has pumped out running backs into the NFL every goddamn year. He's putting people there. An elite recruiter, just everything about him is big time. Okay. At Ohio State, he recruited and developed Ezekiel Elliott, J.K. Dobbins, Travion Henderson. Here at Michigan, he's already gotten a running back drafted with Khalil Mullings, who went in the 6th round last year, I believe. And after that, this year, Justice Haynes will obviously be drafted if he declares. Now, there is smoke, which during the season, I was actually kind of optimistic that Justice Haynes might come back, because I was like, this guy's probably going to go in like the 4th or 5th round. So you'd probably, almost certainly, if you're talking about day 3, almost certainly be able to beat what he would make in 1 year for a running back in the 4th or 5th round. You'd be able to beat that with NIL. Now, if we're talking 2nd, 3rd round, which is where he's kind of being talked about right now, that's a little bit more iffy, because then you're starting to get into the comfortably $2 to $3 million range a year, and it's over 4 years. and you're pretty much guaranteed all of it. You're not guaranteed all of it, but you're pretty much guaranteed all of it. Like, it's a sizable proportion of that contract that is guaranteed. So that is an interesting development to keep an eye on. If Justice Haynes comes back, Michigan will have the best running back room in the country, with the best running back coach in the country, who's also probably the best recruiter at the running back position as well. You got the number one running back in this class, Savion Hyder, to come to Michigan, to a team that is dedicated to running the football. Yeah, this is big time, grand slammed, A plus. Keeping him around was absolutely the correct decision. He has also, just from as far as the big picture, I talked about this Kyle Whittingham, big picture stuff. He's another guy that does have Midwest connections for recruits. Also, a little bit over there in the East Coast, specifically in Virginia. He does seem to have some good connections over there in Virginia. Part of the reason why Savion Hyder was considered a Ohio State lane very early on in his recruitment was because Tony Alford was at Ohio State. He then came to Michigan, and everyone was just like, okay, we'll see if that matters. But ultimately it did. Yeah, that was pretty cool. But yes, Alfred's brother actually coached with Kyle Whittingham at Utah. So that's probably part of the reason why Tony Alford is sticking around here. Because as we'll discuss with everybody else here, it's pretty much just the best pieces from Utah and BYU's coaching staff. So people in the state of Utah or out west in some connections. Okay. Tony Alford is absolutely a coach that'll be out on the recruiting trail, by the way. So that's number 2 right now with Jason Beck and Tony Alford. So yes, if you're keeping track at home, yeah, those are 2 of the 10 coaches that you can have out and about recruiting off campus. Up next is the youngest coach on staff for Michigan, Micah Simon. He's only a couple of months older than I am, which doesn't really bother me, but it bothers some people because he is 28 years old, the same age as my dumbass. He is out here living his dreams, being the wide receiver coach at the University of Michigan, and I live in my parents' basement. Nevertheless, I'm out here on YouTube doing what I do, making videos for fun because I don't have anything better to do. So Micah Simon's an interesting conversation here because he's extraordinarily young, which at some levels is an asset because he's got the energy, he can go around and do things, he can connect with younger kids a lot more easier than, or a lot easier than some of the more older guys on this staff might potentially. Okay, I don't know, but he did get a top 100 wide receiver to commit to Utah. So that's pretty solid, okay, as far as recruiting goes. I was not particularly impressed with the wide receiver coaching at Utah this past year or at New Mexico the year before that. So, as far as being an actual wide receiver coach, I'm not necessarily all that high on him. However, recruiting, he does appear to have some juice. That's why it's a B minus, which is the lowest grade on the staff right now. So I'm just a little bit skeptical. I understand that Jason Beck wants him there because he's a pure Jason Beck offense disciple. Okay. He was with his first career job in football was as an offensive analyst at Syracuse with Jason Beck. He then left and went to Northern Colorado in 2023 to be the wide receiver coach. Then when Jason Beck got the offensive coordinator job at New Mexico, he left and went with Jason Beck to New Mexico, where he was the wide receiver coach there, and then followed Jason Beck to Utah to be the wide receiver coach there. And then now, 3 jobs, 3 years, followed Jason Beck to be here at the University of Michigan. Okay. So this is a very young guy that has, incredible knowledge of the system. He knows exactly what Jason Beck wants these wide receivers to do. So that's valuable from a schematic point. However, the Micah Simon conversation and the assistant wide receiver coach conversation are kind of two sides of the same pole here. So I'm actually legitimately just going to link them together. All right. Marquez Haggins is the assistant wide receiver coach. And Marquez Haggins was with Virginia for 12 seasons. Okay. He was there for goddamn forever. Okay. At Virginia, ended up leaving to go to Penn State, where he was there the past 3 seasons, 2022 or 2023, 2024, and 2025. And he hasn't necessarily developed a lot of big time wide receiver talent that you see in the NFL. Like he's had some guy, Zacchaeus, who played for the Falcons for a while. I'm sure some people might know who he is. He did some of that stuff like that. He also worked with Keandre Lambert Smith, I believe, for a year at Penn State, and I liked Keandre Lambert Smith. So I think he does have those East Coast connections. However, I'm just doing the math. I don't think he's going to be an off-campus recruiter. I don't think so, because I am pretty sure Simon is going to be one. And that pushes us to 3 with Alford and Jason Beck. Now, maybe Jason Beck's not an off-campus recruiter. I don't know. I imagine he is. I'd be shocked if he wasn't. Okay. But maybe he isn't. I don't know. But Marquez Haggins does have a lot of connections on the East Coast in that Northern Virginia, that DMV area where Michigan was doing very well the past couple of years. And I think this is an incredible hiring. Okay. I think he coaches wide receivers very, very well. I think he's a good recruiter. I think he's a really good wide receiver coach. So Micah Simons might have the juice on the recruiting trail, and he'll be able to help with the big picture kind of stuff, just like Coy Detmer will for the quarterbacks. But Marquez Haggins, I think, is the actual guy that's going to be teaching them like how to set up corners and how to deal with press coverage and how to run the routes and how to do all that technical kind of stuff, that footwork that you need, the getting in and out of breaks and stuff like that. I think Marquez Haggins is going to be that coach. And I really like Marquez Haggins. Getting him as an assistant wide receiver coach is a big deal. If they hired him as the wide receiver coach, I'd probably give it a B plus, but he's an A- assistant wide receiver coach because he is going to coach these wide receivers very, very well. Okay. So I do like this hire. I am a fan of this hire. To circle back to Micah Simon, he's so young. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience with all that kind of stuff. That's why his grade is so low. I get why he's here. He's Jason Beck's dude, and by extension, Kyle Whittingham's dude. I fully understand that. I'm just a little bit skeptical of him as a coach because he just doesn't have really any, we hasn't seen him develop anybody. He's had 4 jobs in 4 years. Syracuse to Northern Colorado, or 5 jobs in 5 years, actually now. Syracuse to Northern Colorado to New Mexico to Utah to Michigan. So he hasn't been anywhere long enough to see if he can actually develop wide receivers. Like, we've seen jumps with him with New Mexico, but was that because of him or was that because of Jason Beck? Well, my intuition and just the fact that Jason Beck has a much longer period of time of being a good coach, I would say it probably has more to do with Jason Beck, but that's just me. All right. And what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet. But yeah, I just a tad bit skeptical on Micah Simon, but I do love Marquez Haggins. I think he's a really, really good wide receiver coach. So, yes, I love that for Michigan. I think even more so than that, he's been around coaching wide receivers for 15, 16, 17 years. Like, he can help Micah Simon develop into a wide receiver coach. So, having that veteran voice who has, like, he's never been an offensive coordinator, he's just been a wide receiver coach for so long. So, like, this is I think a big veteran add for this wide receiver room, and an incredibly smart hire by Kyle Whittingham. An incredibly smart hire. So I really like Marquez Haggins. I think Micah Simon has a ton of potential, but I'm just a little bit skeptical. Up next is tight end coach Freddie Whittingham. Kyle Whittingham's brother. I got him and Alex Whittingham, who is the linebacker coach, who we will also talk about in this video, mixed up a couple of days ago. I thought I thought it was the other way around. It's not. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Freddie Whittingham, the tight end coach, is his brother, and he's been tight end coach for 10 years at Utah. So this is one of those hires, man, where it's not a bad hire, but if the coach wasn't your brother, you wouldn't be here. All right. Freddie Whittingham is a solid, a just good tight end coach. Okay. If I'm being honest with you, I think Steve Kasula is a better tight end coach than him. Okay. So I think this is a little bit of a downgrade. I think actual wide receiver coach is also maybe a little bit of a downgrade because I like Ron Bellamy a lot. But we didn't have a quarterback coach last year, so that's an upgrade. Tony Halford is staying the same. Offensive coordinator is an upgrade, even though again Chip Lindsey is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, but I really think Michigan probably could have done better at the tight end position. Now, he did help Dalton Kincaid develop into a first-round pick, but that's like it. Like he has not put a lot of guys into the NFL. Certainly not like Michigan has, but really, I don't particularly think that they've had a whole lot of very good players. Now they had some guys, Brant Kuthi, I think is his name, who was in all Pac-12 tight end a couple of times, but like I don't know. This is just not an impressive hire to me. I'm not trying to be negative, but this is just not an impressive hire to me. I think it's an all right. I think he's an all right coach. However, if Kyle Whittingham, the head coach, wasn't his brother, I do not think he would be in contention for any school as big as Michigan's tight end job. I just don't, fundamentally. He probably will be on another coach that'll put us up to 5 now. That will be out there recruiting. Okay, I do think that he did that previously, and I do think here he will be out there doing stuff for recruiting wise. But overall, I think it's okay. I gave it a B because he does have a track record of having at least quality tight end play. Again, he's been the tight end coach of Utah for 10 years. They've had good tight ends. Okay. They had Dalton Kincaid. They had a couple of all conference tight ends, but like, I'm just not impressed with his coaching legacy. Okay. That's just me though. Moving on to someone who I am thoroughly impressed with. We have offensive line coach Jim Harding. You can already see the grade. It's an A+. Okay. Retending Tony Alford was a no-brainer to me. Bringing along Jim Harding is also a no-brainer. Okay. This man has a proven developmental fortitude on the offensive line. He's developed Garrett Bowles. He's developed Braden Daniels, who got drafted, I think, 2 years ago. He might have 2 first-round picks this year. He's going to definitely have one in Caleb Lomu, I think is his name. But his right tackle also might end up going in the first round as well. So, yeah, this is a proven developer of talent who has never had the amount of talent that he's going to have in the room next year. Okay. This is one of the 3 to 5 best offensive line coaches in college football. This is a phenomenal coach who has a long and extensive history of developing offensive linemen into being very, very, very good. They pretty much never had bad offensive lines at Utah his entire tenure, which is crazy to think about because he's been there for I think 11 years. Since 2014 is when he started there. So that'd be 12 years actually if you count through 2025. So this is a big time get for Kyle Whittingham, and more importantly, I think this hire had a lot to do with a lot of these players coming back very recently along the offensive line. Okay. Now, there were, I think, 3 or 4 players that like pretty much immediately went into the transfer portal. Jake Granera, Andrew Spragg, Caden Strayhorn, Bear McWharton, and I think there were another couple offensive linemen who I'm blanking on right now. Okay. They all went into the portal, and I get why. Grant Newsome was very much what I call a personality recruiter, where he wasn't really recruiting with the brand or saying, "Oh, look at all these facilities." So that he's mainly uh, recruiting via having a relationship with you and getting you to like him, and then being like, "Hey, listen, this is all the stuff that we can do. I'm a good coach. You like me. You can come to Michigan." Sharon Moore was very much the same way, and he was also very involved with the offensive line. Obviously, that was his baby. Okay. So it was not shocking to me when a ton of these offensive linemen went into the portal. Okay. I thought Michigan was going to be able to keep enough pieces together to where they maybe with 1 or 2 supplements from the portal would still be able to have a very, very good offensive line next year. But now that Jake Granera has come back, now that Andrew Spragg has come back, now that Andrew Babola is getting healthy, Blake Frazier has announced that he's coming back. Evan Link has announced that he's coming back. Now this offensive line next year is shaping up to be one of the best in college football. Okay. So a couple of things with the offensive line here. I think 4 of the 5 starters are effectively already known. I really would be astonished if these 4 guys didn't end up starting. Okay. Number 1, left tackle. I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being Andrew Babola. As much as I like Blake Frazier and think he has a ton of talent, Andrew Babola was the one pushing Evan Link this summer, not Blake Frazier. All right. And had Andrew Babola been healthy, they damn well might have just kicked Evan Link inside to guard like they're most likely going to do this year, last year, and just started Andrew Babola at left tackle. That very easily could have been something that happened. Or if they didn't feel comfortable doing that, Giovanni El Hadi missed some time at left guard. So they probably just would have moved Evan Link to left guard at that point and then brought in Andrew Babola. But he tore his ACL, I believe, missed the whole year. So it's kind of a moot point. All of that aside, Andrew Babola was a consensus top 10 prospect in the country in his recruiting class. Like, that's an elite talent. That's like a legitimate top 10 pick talent along the offensive line. Okay. I think he's staying at left tackle. I really do. I don't think he's going to the right side, which is something I've seen some people talk about. I think he's a left tackle. Okay. Now, Blake Frazier is absolutely going to fight for that spot. Okay. I don't necessarily see him winning. That's just my opinion. Okay. Now, moving on to inside. Again, immediately after the season ended this year, it was like, oh, okay, we're going to see some changes and we're going to see some shuffling along the offensive line uh, in terms of changing positions and stuff like that. Okay. Immediately, the smoke was Evan Link's going to left guard. He's going to guard. Okay. Evan Link is a guard at the next level anyway, in my opinion. Okay. But I think, is going to do a very, very good job at left guard. Because people talk about the 3 redshirt freshmen that they had starting on the offensive line, Andrew Spragg, Granea, and Blake Frazier at left tackle. But you got to remember, Blake Frazier was left tackle 3. Okay. Evan Link was left tackle 1. So Evan Link is going to move inside to guard, and I think he's going to do really, really, really well at guard. Okay. I think he was an all right tackle, like good in pass protection, kind of meh in uh run blocking. I don't think run blocking was particularly his strength, but I actually think his athleticism and his ability to work to the second level is going to translate when he moves inside, and also just his general athleticism, because he is an athlete. He's a very good athlete. He was a top 100 recruit for a reason. Very good athlete. Okay. So I think will thrive when moved inside to guard. So I think left tackle is going to end up being Babola. Wouldn't be shocking if it was Frazier, but I think it's going to be Babola. Left guard, I think, is going to be Evan Link. Center, the other major piece of information, or one of the three major pieces of information that came out kind of towards the end, not towards the end of the season, after the Ohio State lost in like the week or so that happened after that, the smoke all came out. And usually that's the smoke that you can listen to. Usually the early smoke is what I call fire smoke, meaning that where there's smoke, there's fire. So that's the phrase. So I call it fire smoke. And then there's smoke screen smoke, which is self-explanatory. I don't think that was smoke screen smoke. I think that was fire smoke, mainly because why would you smoke screen smoke something like that? I mainly use that terminology when I'm talking about the NFL draft, but it also applied here. Okay. I believe that Jake Renea, just like the smoke said, is going to end up being your starting center. All right. He is phenomenal. He was our best offensive lineman this year. It was close with him and Sprague. And had Evan Link been healthy, he might have been in that conversation, but I don't know about that. We didn't get a full healthy season from Evan Link, so I don't really know. Um, but yeah, I think Renee is going to end up at center. Okay, right guard we're actually going to skip because right guard is where the position battle is, and we don't really know who's going to end up there. Okay, and then right tackle is going to be Andrew Sprague. All right, now before Sprague announced that he was coming back today for me, yesterday for you, because I had to skip a day because I couldn't finish this video beforehand. And get it uploaded at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, so it's going up on Thursday. Sorry about that. I don't care. I thought Frazier was going to be the one moving over to right guard, Blake Frazier, or right tackle, rather, not right guard, at right tackle, because Babola, again, I think stays at left tackle. I think left tackle is the more valuable spot than right tackle because it's the blind side, blah, 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 blah. You kind of already know that. But also, Babola is just a significantly better athlete, and you want the athleticism on the left side of the line, generally speaking. Okay. So I thought Blake Frazier might end up being the right tackle where they might just go to him and say, hey, listen, we're going to spend all off season flipping all of your fundamentals, all of your footwork, all of that. And we're going to cross train you at right tackle, which you should do that with all your offensive linemen anyway. Okay. You should always cross train on both sides of the ball and at center, if we're being honest with you. But that's nonetheless, that's just a coaching philosophy that I have where you should always do both sides of the same thing, but it doesn't matter. Right tackle is going to be Andrew Sprague. There's no way that it's not Andrew Sprague. He's starting this year. He's going to start next year at right tackle. He's not moving into guard. He's fucking 6'8". Stop it. Because that's something I've seen people on Twitter talk about. Oh, Sprague's going to move at right tackle, and then they're going to put Balboa, or right guard, and then they're going to put Balboa at right tackle. No, they're fucking not. You're lying to yourself. Stop it. Sprague is the starting right tackle. Okay. Right guard is where the interesting conversation exists for me. Okay. Because Nathan Afobe fucking balled out in the bowl game against Texas. According to PFF, he was the best player for Michigan that day. And I don't disagree. I thought he played very, very well. Okay. So right now, I would lean towards Nathan Afobe being the guy at right guard. Now, he may end up moving on. Okay, because of the talent along the offensive line, it wouldn't surprise me. Okay, he has not, to my knowledge, and at this point in time, which is almost midnight on the 7th, he has not entered the transfer portal, so he's still got time, but he hasn't done it yet. So hypothetically, he could still go into the transfer portal and get a for sure 100% guaranteed starting spot somewhere, because he'd absolutely would be able to get that. So but right now, I would say Nathan Afobe is the leader in the clubhouse at right guard. Okay. Andrew Gack, I think is how you say his name, is another guy that I believe was a true freshman this year that a lot of people are talking about oh, he's going to surprise some people. He's going to pop up and he's going to compete for a starting spot somewhere, maybe center, maybe guard. All of that aside, I think the actual player that's competing with Nathan Afobe at right guard is going to be Ty Haywood. All right. This is something that I said when Ty Haywood committed to Michigan. I was like, yeah, he's listed as a tackle. He's going to move inside the guard. And that was another part of the smoke that came out right after the end of the season, that Ty Haywood is probably going to end up moving in at right guard. He's just not long enough, in my opinion, to stick at tackle. Now, he's athletic enough that he probably could get the job done. But when you've got 6'8" and generational length with Andrew Babola at left tackle, and Blake Frazier is also long, if you're going to get on the field, you got to move inside. So it wouldn't surprise me if the 5-star for 99% of the process, who became a 4-star because he flipped his commitment to Michigan, it would not surprise me if he ended up pushing for right guard playing time next year. Okay. Right now, as of this moment in time, Michigan is looking really, really good on the offensive line for next year. I'm not necessarily entirely comfortable with the depth at the center position, with Strayhorn gone, committed to Alabama, I believe. But, if Grenada gets hurt, maybe somebody else steps up. I don't know. Maybe somebody doesn't step up. Maybe it's a disaster. I'm not sure, but I would maybe look into going into the portal and trying to get a center there, at least to be a backup. Gentlemen and ladies, I guess, too, although I don't imagine there are a whole lot of ladies willing to come on here to look at my ugly ass. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, what I am about to present to you is an outlier opinion. Okay? This is not a hot take. I have the research to back this up. Okay? I don't think Jay Hill is a great defensive coordinator. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. There is a lot of stuff that once you dig into it, he's kind of the inverse of Wink Martindale. He's not the anti-Wink Martindale, because that would mean that he does good everything that Wink Martindale does bad and also does the things that Wink Martindale does good. No, he's the opposite of Wink Martindale. All right. What were the major complaints about Wink Martindale? Oh, third and wink. That's right. You get into third and long or third down, and you give up a first down, because that's just what Wink Martindale defenses did. At least this year. He was actually much better in 2024. But doesn't matter. Okay. Jay Hill is the inverse of Wink Martindale. He is not the same coach, even though the schemes are on the surface level kind of similar. Okay. Both more man coverage than an average scheme, although Wink Martindale was much more willing to play zone than Jay Hill was, or at least this past year he was. They both blitz a lot. The difference is Wink Martindale actually had players that could rush the passer and has consistently throughout his career. He's also been much better at generating pressure with blitzes throughout his career as a defensive coordinator than Jay Hill has. Okay. Jay Hill is an interesting conversation because a lot of people are saying this is the hire that makes me believe in Kyle Whittingham. For me, that's I almost said Tim Beck. Jason Beck. That's Jason Beck to me. That's the hire that makes me believe Kyle Whittingham's going to be a success. I can take it or leave it with Jay Hill. I got to be honest with you. Okay. There are some really, really kind of strange stats when you look at BYU's defense from this past year and overarching in his tenure. I'm going to go ahead and start here with the most lofty of these stats, okay? So this is opponent passing down success, okay, which is an advanced statistic. And the way that works is passing down is defined as first and 15 plus, second and 9 plus, or third/fourth down and 5 plus, okay? converted, for the sake of the percentage of the plays that are converted, which is what we're going to be talking about. Converted is defined as scoring a touchdown, getting a first down, getting 50% of the total yardage on first down. So if you have 1st and 20 after a holding penalty, you get 12 yards. That's a success in this metric. Getting 70 yards on second down. Okay, so 2nd and 10, you get 7 yards. That's a success. Or converting on 3rd/4th down. Okay. And what is really interesting is that when you go through this statistic for Michigan here, under Mike McDonald, 2021, opponents converted or had success on 26% of passing downs. Okay. And had a negative EPA per play on average. All right. EPA per play, another expected points added per play. That's what that is. It's an advanced statistic. We don't need to break down all of that. Most people know what EPA is. All right. EPA per play was in the negative under McDonald. Okay. In 2022 and 2023 under Jesse Minter, again, negative EPA per play, 22% success rate and 24% success rate in 2022 and 2023, respectively. All right. Then 2024 with Wink Martindale, it was 28% respective, a success rate, and a positive EPA that was kind of towards the average for what this statistic is looking at. Okay. Jay Hill in 2024 had a 31% success rate. Okay. Which is about average, and a positive, but a, good on the, edge of above average and good level of EPA added. Okay. Per play. This past year, he was at 26% in success on passing downs in this metric, with a just barely positive EPA per play. So this past year in this metric, the defense was as good as the Mike McDonald defense in 2021. Just about. Mike McDonald, a little bit better in EPA per play, but both at 26% success rate. All right. So that is interesting, because when you dig into the raw numbers and other advanced statistics as well, this defense is not all that, in my opinion. Okay. And also, just watching BYU film for this, I did not come away particularly impressed with the defense. Okay. So when you look at this defense here, all right, the biggest thing in terms of just the raw numbers, moving away from the advanced stats here, the biggest thing in terms of the raw numbers is going to be they had 156 missed tackles this past year, according to PFF. Okay. That's 103rd in college football. All right. To put that into context, Michigan last year had 123 missed tackles, which was ranked 30th in college football for fewest. So lower number, fewer tackles. Okay. Washington State was ranked the worst at 194. However, that was also an outlier. They had 30 more than second to last. But I just want to put it out there. And Texas Tech had the least at 98. Okay. So in that range, BYU firmly is towards the end of this. And that was the thing that I noticed when I was watching the film kind of casually. I didn't go too deep into it because I don't have time to. But I did notice that they're not a particularly good, in fact, they're quite bad of a tackling team. All right. I also just was not impressed with a lot of the other aspects of this defense. Okay. They were 50th in raw passing defense grade. Okay. And that's right in line with that's just total passing yards. Okay. That's what that is. And that's right in line with the PFF grade, which is 46th in the country. Okay. They did not rush the passer very well at all. Okay. That's 92nd pass rush grade in PFF. Abysmal at generating pressure, even when blitzing. Okay. They were not a very good pass rushing team. They were 70th in raw rush defense grade in PFF, the 60th overall defense, so right smack dab in the middle of college football in PFF. They also had the 62nd fewest defensive penalties. So again, right smack dab in the middle of penalties. And to put that in perspective, I believe Michigan was 15th in defensive penalties this past year, which is weird because you remember a lot of them. Like I remember people getting real mad about, I can't remember what game it was, about the penalties or whatever. And they only had like 4 penalties the entire game. It's just that they were all killer penalties. And that was the kind of the case with Michigan this past year. A very disciplined playing team by a head coach who was not disciplined, but a disciplined playing team that did not do a whole lot of penalties. Okay. And that's been Michigan's calling card the past couple of years. They just don't do penalties. All right. So we're taking a significant step back in a lot of different separate categories here. Okay. And that's a little bit concerning for me. All right. Now let's move on to the good things. Okay. So by the way, those are all things that Wink Martindale was very good at. We had a really good run defense. We had generated pressure. Okay. And we were really good on first and second down, which BYU wasn't. Okay. Third down. Yeah. Third and Wink. I get it. And third down is the money down. All right. But when I say that Jay Hill is the opposite of Wink Martindale, this is what I mean. Okay. Because BYU this past year, not particularly good on first and second down, borderline elite, a great third down defense, and a really good borderline great fourth down defense. All right. So to put this in perspective, 19th in the country in third down conversions. They were tied with 3 other teams. So hypothetically, you could say 16th best for third down conversion rate allowed in college football. Okay. They were 37th in fourth down conversion, which is on the cusp of what I would define as like really good. All right. So that is good. So he gets, even though he might give up some yardage on first and second down, he gets off the field on third down, which is the exact opposite of Wink Martindale. Wink Martindale didn't give up shit on first and second down, but then you convert third and 10 like it was nothing. Okay. There are also schematic similarities between BYU and Wink Martindale, and also Utah's defense and Don Brown. And I know that that's a dirty word, but Don Brown was an elite defensive coordinator at Michigan when they were playing any team that wasn't Ohio State. Okay. Because Ryan Day made his living on destroying man coverage. And that's what Michigan ran. So that was just a horrendous matchup. But Don Brown was actually a very, very exceptional defensive coordinator when he was playing any team other than Ohio State. So I get that that's a dirty word here, but he was a very good defensive coordinator. And then obviously Mike McDonald is going to be coach of the year in the NFL this year, in my opinion. Home run defensive coordinator. Jesse Minter, very likely to end up being a head coach this offseason. Maybe with the Ravens, because they fired John Harbaugh for no fucking reason. But maybe. I don't know. But all of that aside, the broad strokes of these defenses are the same. Man coverage more than most teams, which was the case with Michigan under Binter and specifically Mike McDonald. Mike McDonald played a lot more man coverage because he had such a great defensive line that he knew he was going to get pressure. So he was just like, we just need to not have separation for 2.5 seconds. And if we do that, then we're going to get home with our defensive line. So that's pretty much what Mike McDonald did in 2021. It fucking worked. 2022, 2023, a little bit more creative with Jesse Minter. Blitzed a little bit more because they didn't have the pass rushers that they had in 2021. We're getting off track here a little bit. The broad strokes of the defensive scheme schematically are kind of the same, except BYU and Utah both ran way more man coverage than Michigan did this past year under Wink Martindale, and really kind of the past 2 or 3 years, because Michigan did run more zone coverage in 2023 than they did in 2022 or 2021. Okay, but all of that aside, kind of jumbling all of this together, Jay Hill is a competent, quality defensive coordinator. He is a good defensive coordinator. And when you look at the opponent adjusted stats, that does show a little bit more. Okay. So these are statistics from collegefootballnerds.com. I recommend you use their website. They have the best statistics, in my opinion. Okay. These people do what is called opponent adjusted rankings, meaning they take the average for all of your opponents, of course, the game, and then they say, okay, did you hold them to above their average or below their average? Okay, and BYU held teams below their average quite a bit. Okay, two aspects that they were genuinely elite in. Okay. Number one was that third down defense, which we already kind of talked about. Number two is red zone defense, which again was kind of a problem under Wink Martindale. So Jay Hill is like the opposite of Wink Martindale. Okay. BYU had the number 15 scoring defense in opponent adjusted statistics. Okay. That's borderline elite. That's a fantastic defense. Okay. They were 29th in opponent adjusted yards per game, 40th in opponent adjusted passing yards per game, 28th in opponent adjusted rushing yards per game, and 36th in both opponent adjusted passing yards per attempt and opponent adjusted rushing yards per attempt. So when you get down and look at it, it was a quality defense that got off the field on third down, created turnovers because they had a lot of turnover. They had a lot of interceptions this year. They were tied for ninth in total interceptions. They were graded sixth in red zone defense as well, which I forgot to mention. So this is a elite caliber red zone defense that gets turnovers and gets off the field on third down. You can do a lot fucking worse than that. Okay. But I just want to say this. A lot of people are acting like Jay Hill is this grand slam home run hire that's going to bring Michigan back to the levels of defense that they had in 2022 and 2023 and 2024 to an extent. Although that was a step down from 2022 and 23, in my opinion. But I actually think 2024 defense was better than 2021 defense. But we don't need to get into semantics of all this. All right. I don't see that happening. I don't see 2022, 2023, 2024 coming back under Jay Hill, at least not right now. I struggle to kind of see like the big time upside with him as far as all of this, because he's never really put together an elite defense as a defense coordinator. Now, he was at Weber State for a while and they had really good defenses while he was there, but that's also the FCS level. And I don't know how much of that is going to translate, because his 3 years at BYU as defensive coordinator, he got better every year, but he never came close to touching across the board great defense or elite defense. Got not even anywhere in that conversation. So I think that this conversation surrounding Jay Hill just needs a little bit more nuance than a lot of people are giving it, and that's why I gave it a B. Okay, you could talk me into a B plus, but my initial gut reaction was like, this is A plus, and then I dug into it. That's just not the case, in my opinion. I think he's going to put together quality, competent defenses that get off the field on third down, but I'm not sure we're going to see elite levels of defense out of a Jay Hill defense. Okay, that's just my opinion, as always. So Lewis Powell is the edge coach for Michigan. That, I believe, is his official title. I don't think it's defensive end coach. I think it's edge coach. All right. And this is an interesting conversation because he's also the edge coach at Utah. He's been at Utah for 11 seasons and has produced a ton of all, not a ton. He's produced he's produced several All-Americans, a Conference Defensive Player of the Year, and a couple of NFL draft picks as edge rushers at Utah. And when you look at him, the coaching is excellent, I think, okay? If you're just going by this past season, John Henry Daly is just built different, and he got a lot of pressure and a lot of sacks on his own because he's very, very good. Now, Lewis Powell is absolutely a big-time part of that, and I do like Lewis Powell a lot. However, one of the things that I think it's just the overall play hasn't been all that impressive from the defensive ends, okay? They're good. They're not great or elite. Again, John Henry Daly, Bradley and I are exceptions, but when it comes to actual putting people into the NFL, doesn't have a whole lot of track record of that, but he also didn't have a whole lot of access to NFL type talent, or at least NFL type potential talent, which is going to have at Michigan now. Okay. I think he's a very good coach. I just have some questions about the consistency of his teams as well as the actual pass rushing of his teams because like he's had a couple of guys that are very good pass rushers, but I don't know, something about this just feels a little bit lacking. Okay, again, he's a good coach. All right, a B is a good coach. Okay, and specifically this past year, rush defense at the edge position to me was very good for Utah. It wasn't great, okay, or elite, but it was very good. John Henry Daly, more of a pass rusher than a run defender, still a very good run defender. Other guy, I think they had a kid named Pat Fitzgerald and like Logan Anai or something like that. Logan Fano was his name. Good run defenders as the edge rusher position. Good run defenders that played quite a bit. And Pat Fitzgerald didn't play quite a lot, but the other kid was Lance Holtzclaw, rather. Pat Fitzgerald's a young kid. Lance Holtzclaw is the other edge rusher that I was thinking of. Also very good in run defense. Pass rush wise, it was basic John Henry Daly and everybody else. Nobody else was really all that impressive to me. Again, Logan Fano was good. He wasn't great or elite, and John Henry Daly was. He was elite as a pass rusher, an incredible pass rusher. I just the edge play for Utah over the past couple of years has been good. It hasn't been great or anything. Okay, and I think Lewis Powell is going to do a good job. I think he raises the floor of this team for edge rushers. Okay. I'm just not entirely sold that about the recruiting side of this, if I'm being honest with you. As a coach, he's probably a B plus A minus, but the recruiting is an aspect of college coaching that is almost just as important as coaching itself and developing. Okay. And I am not sold on him as a recruiter, okay? Because he is going to go out and recruit. Now, luckily for him, he has his partner on the defensive line is a very good recruiter. Okay. He might not be the best coach, but he's a very good recruiter. All right. Lewis Powell does have some connections in Southern California. He has gotten guys to go to Utah. So it's not like he's a dead weight on the recruiting trail or anything. I just haven't seen it yet. And I have a real hard time grading on potential. Okay. So right now it's a B. If we're just talking about coaching ability, it's probably B plus A minus. If we're just talking recruiting, it's probably B minus C plus. Okay. I think he did an okay job recruiting at Utah. I think he did a good job coaching and a good job developing as well. So overall, the grade is a B. But I do think he's a very, very good coach. Okay. Next coach up is, in fact, Lou Esposito, whose official title is not D tackle coach, like I've put on the screen here. It is actually defensive line coach. He's retaining his official title as defensive line coach for Michigan. It's just that he's going to work with the D tackles now. Like, we have an edge coach. It's pretty obvious what the defensive line coach is going to be. So I put D tackle coach. All right. And the grade is also a B, but kind of for the inverse reasons of Lewis Powell. Okay. I spoke about this at like my end of the year review after the Ohio State loss. I said, if Michigan was going to move on from a coach, it should probably be Lou Esposito. Even though he's done a good job recruiting, I feel like everybody's gotten worse with him as the defensive line coach. Okay. Like, I don't think you can give him a whole lot of credit for Derek Moore. I don't think you can give him a whole lot of credit for Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant, because those guys were already made before he got here, in my opinion. Like, Derek Moore was fantastic in 2022 or flashed the fuck out at 2022 and was our best edge rusher in 2023 in the national championship team. And then very good in 2024 and excellent this past year. So he was already good when he came in. And when you look at every other piece on the defensive line, Rayshon Benny got worse. Okay. Trey Pierce, who played really well this year, but about the same as last year, didn't improve a whole lot. Damon Payne came over from Alabama, did not improve. He's the same player he was at Alabama. The kid from Clemson, Trey Williams, same exact kid that he was at Clemson. Okay. I don't see him developing or progressing the defensive lineman per se, at least so far into his career at Michigan with only 2 years. All right. He did have some guys at Western Michigan that developed and went on to be NFL talents. Marshall Keeneland, I think, is the big one, who went in like the second round to the Cowboys, I think. So it's not that he can't develop, he just hasn't done it here, and I don't really know why, other than he hasn't done it here. So if we were going to move on from a coach, which we ended up moving around from most of the coaches, but if we ended up moving on from the coach last year, my point was that it probably was going to be Lou Esposito, because I think he had done the least good of a job. Like, he did a good job, but he was also the coach, in my opinion, that was doing the least good. So he was still doing a good job, but everybody was doing a good job, in my opinion, on the Michigan coaching staff. So yeah. But all of that being aside, the reason Lou Esposito is here is because he's a very good recruiter. Okay. He put together a fantastic defensive line class this year. Not just 5-star Carter Williams, but big time talent, obviously 5-star Carter Williams. And speaking of Lewis Powell, I totally forgot about Carter Williams. Absolutely should have mentioned Carter Williams. Lewis Powell, if Lewis Powell could develop Carter Meadows, rather, I think is his name. 5-star defensive lineman. Okay. I think it's Carter Meadows, right? I'm going to double check real quick. Carter Meadows. It is Carter Meadows, not Carter Williams. I have no idea why I said Carter Williams, but I'm not stopping and recording this shit over. It's fucking 1:15 a.m. I don't give a fuck anymore. I think Lou Esposito is here to recruit. Okay. That's why he's here. All right. He is less here to coach the defensive tackles, in my opinion, and more here to recruit defensive linemen on the road. That is why I think Lou Esposito is here. And he's very good at it. Great at it. He's great at it. Not very good. He's great at it. He's put together 2 really solid defensive line classes that could have been even better had he somehow managed to hold on to Julian Walker. But I felt like that recruiting was pretty telegraphed that he was going to end up at South Carolina. Even though he committed to Michigan, I felt like it was telegraphed pretty clearly that he was going to go to South Carolina. But that's just me. Okay. I just Lou Esposito was an interesting keep for me that I didn't particularly understand until I thought about it a little bit more. And it's just like, oh, Kyle Whittingham has no fucking connections in the state of Michigan or really in the Midwest at all. And Lou Esposito was the Midwest recruiter. Now, being in the Midwest, Michigan had more than one Midwest recruiter. Ron Bellamy was also a very prominent recruiter in the Midwest. But Lou Esposito was like the Midwest regional sort of recruiting guy for Michigan, and he will most likely retain that role here. That is why I think Lou Esposito was retained. I think it's an interesting decision because I felt like you probably could have found somebody with Midwest ties at maybe a different position. And he did kind of with, Haggins, who had, his East Coast connections and stuff like that, but also some connections in the Midwest. He's pulled some players from the Midwest before. And yeah, but special teams coordinator Kerry Coombs is obviously a guy that's got a ton of connections in the Midwest and the state of Ohio. But all of this aside, I'm not angry. I think it's a B. He's just the opposite of Lewis Powell. So Lewis Powell, very good coach, questionable recruiter. Louis Esposito, very good recruiter, questionable coach, in my opinion. So I think it works out. Okay, you got a little bit of both with your two defensive line coaches. So I'm pretty happy about that. So Alex Whittingham is the linebacker coach for the University of Michigan. And yeah, do I have to say it? I I mean, listen, he's worked with Kansas City for the past couple of years, kind of all over the place, okay? His first year with Kansas City was 2018, where his official title was as a defensive assistant. He worked with the outside linebackers. He was then a defensive quality control coach for the next 5 years, 2019 to 2023. And or is that 29, yeah, no, 5 years. And he worked with the defensive line for 1 year and then linebackers for the next 4. And then in 2024, he was promoted to the assistant, rather in 2024, he then became a defensive assistant again, this time for the secondary. And in 2025, he was promoted to the assistant defensive line coach, all with Kansas City. Okay. So Kansas City does have very good coaching staff. Okay. Obviously, it's an NFL team. All right. And he has worked extensively with the linebackers before. And when you look at, Kansas City's defensive linemen and stuff like that, and linebackers, you know, yes. Okay. So I get it. Troy Bolton or is that his name? Troy Bolton. His last name's Bolton. He played at Missouri. He was a second round pick. Who was their starting linebacker. He's very good. A lot of people, I actually was kind of high on him. I think I had a top 50 grade on him. But nevertheless, a lot of people did not particularly think he was going to end up being a very good player. Bolton was a very good player and is still for Kansas City, I believe. So maybe he had something to do with that. Maybe he didn't. He worked with other players like uh, uh, Drew Tranquil, who's a quality rotational kind of guy along the edge for Kansas City back when they were still running a more traditional 3-4. They're not doing that anymore. Nobody is. Nobody runs a 3-4. Nobody runs a 4-3 in the NFL anymore. It's all hybrid. But all of that aside, he just has way too many unknowns. Like we don't know what he did at Kansas City. Like when he was the edge coach and with the defensive line in 2018 and 2019, James Houston was amazing. Am I going to give him credit for James Houston? No, because James Houston was amazing before he got there. So and am I going to give him credit for Bolton being a really good linebacker, or am I going to give it to the actual linebacker coach who was probably working with him more? Because generally speaking, when you're the actual linebacker coach, you work with the first and second team guys, and then the assistant linebacker coach will work with the second and third team guys, just more closely. All right, so to speak. I do not know what this is going to look like. He's never recruited, so there's that. But he has worked all over the place on the defense. He's worked with edge rushers. He's worked with defensive line, the secondary, with the linebackers most prominently. this is just, I can't give it a grade because I don't have any information to go off of. So like that's why it's all question marks. I don't really know what to do with this hire. It was just so weird. Like I felt like there were probably at least 2 dozen guys, including Brian Jean Mary, that you probably could have kept around, but or gotten to come to Michigan easily. Kind of like with the other Whittingham, I do not think this guy would be a candidate for a job at Michigan if his dad wasn't the head coach. Up next, we have the defensive back coach, Gennaro Guilford. And this is an interesting piece here because he is, I believe, the only guy from BYU last year that Jay Hill brought with him. There were other people that had been at BYU before, I think, maybe not, I don't remember. But I do really like Guilford. The reality of the situation is that during his decade at BYU, he started in 2016 and lasted through this year. That's 10 years. So he, or 10 seasons. So he has consistently gotten his defensive back units to go for interceptions and to get turnovers. Okay. That is something that Jesse Minter had a knack for as well. And Guilford very, very much is also the kind of coach that emphasizes getting turnovers. Okay. Now, during his time at BYU, the secondary kind of fluctuated quite a bit in terms of its goodness. All right. At a place like BYU where you can't consistently get high end talent, it's not that big of a deal. It's not necessarily an indictment on the quality of coach. And you can see by the A- grade, actually, I really like him. So, like, yeah. But there is just a little bit of nuance there. The secondaries have been wildly inconsistent during his time at BYU. I do expect him to be very, very good for Michigan, and I do expect Michigan's ball, not only just interceptions, but knocking the ball out with hits and with your hands, just plays on the ball. I do expect them to relatively dramatically improve. And specifically, I love this for a guy like Jair Hill, who has tremendous instincts. Okay. And if he can get the technique a little bit better, because that's really where Jair Hill has been struggling the past couple of years, is his technique and his agility, his footwork in order to get in and out of breaks. Now, Jair Hill was very good this past year. Okay, he wasn't great, but he was very good. Uh, and kind of not talked about a lot either. He had like a good year. He just There wasn't a lot of noise there because they were kind of just throwing the ball elsewhere. Like he got targeted some, but he didn't really get targeted as much as basically anybody else. Nevertheless, Jair Hill had a good year last year, and I love this hire for him. So Guilford's official title is defensive back coach. However, given that we have a safeties coach, I imagine Guilford is going to be the one working with the cornerbacks specifically. Okay. I imagine if they have an assistant secondary coach or something like that, that person might specialize in nickels, but I could be wrong, or slot corners. I could very well be wrong, but that's how I would do it probably personally, given that there are no limits on how many coaches you can actually hire to be coaches. Or you can only have a certain amount of people out recruiting, which I do believe Guilford will be a person that goes out and recruits as well as the other secondary coach who we'll talk about next. Nevertheless, I do think this is a great hire because it brings a little bit of consistency for Jay Hill. Okay. Jay Hill's going to have to work with a young linebacker coach who's never coached in college before. He's going to have to work with 2 defensive line coaches that he's never worked with before. Okay. Or did Lewis Powell coach at BYU? I don't think so, but it doesn't matter. If he has, then he hasn't coached with him for a very long time. So this is not somebody that I particularly think or this is not something that I am particularly against, okay? Because he's a good coach. Okay. Now, is Lamar Morgan a better coach than Geronimo Guilford? I think it's close. I do. But I would say yes. I would say Lamar Morgan is better than Geronimo Guilford, especially given we know how good of a recruiter Lamar Morgan is. And we know that he develops people, or at least in a very small sample size, the secondary, pretty much everybody in the secondary that was playing significant snaps in 2024 got better in 2025. Zeke Berry, um, Mason Curtis got some playing time as a true freshman. He was much better this year, even though he did have his learning moments as well because he was playing more and in a bigger variety of situations. They asked him to do more, but still, he improved. Jair Hill improved. So, yeah, I believe that Lamar Morgan is a better coach and a better recruiter than Guilford, but I don't think it's a very big drop off. And having the continuity with your defensive coordinator is a very good thing because Jay Hill is going to know that the secondary is going to be coached exactly the way he wants it to be. He knows that they're going to understand the big picture and why they're doing things because he was with him at BYU, so he understands that. So this I think is a underrated hire again from an organizational standpoint in terms of having cohesiveness with the staff. This is, I think, an underrated hire that people don't talk about how well this fits into what Kyle Whittingham is trying to build in this coaching staff. So Tyler Stockton is the last of our main sort of coaches here that we're going to talk about. Uh, Obviously, I still have special teams coordinator and strength and conditioning coach that I'm going to talk about. But in terms of the traditional sort of coaching staff, we're kind of done with that conversation after Mr. Stockton here. Okay. So, Tyler Stockton played at Notre Dame. He was actually a defensive lineman, which is a little bit weird to transition to being a safeties coach from defensive line, but that doesn't matter all that much. Um, he then started as a GA at UConn, ended up getting his first job as the defensive line coach at Western Illinois, got promoted to defensive coordinator and switched from defensive line coach to outside linebacker coach in 2018. He then jumped up to Division 1 ball, or is no Western Illinois FCS. Jumped up to the FBS level, and with Ball State, where he was the defensive coordinator slash inside linebackers coach for 3 seasons until 2021, when he was promoted to assistant head coach slash defensive coordinator slash inside linebacker coach. So effectively, in order to keep him around, they gave him another title. And then he ended up going to Boise State as the co-defensive coordinator slash safeties coach for the past 2 years. Now at Michigan, he is just the safeties coach. He is not anything else. He's not a co-defense coordinator, an assistant head coach, or assistant to the head coach, associate head coach, whatever AHC stands for, and whatever terminology you want to use. Nevertheless, this is a good hire, in my opinion. I really like him. I think he's a plus on the recruiting trail. This also was the one that kind of came out of nowhere to me. Like I thought, oh, okay, we've got this the defensive back coach because Guilford got announced before Stockton. Stockton kind of came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, this is a really good coach. This is somebody who's been nominated for the Broyles Award for the best assistant coach in college football 3 separate times, 2021, 2022, and 2023, all with Ball State. Uh, Very, very good. Uh, not just coach, but actually kind of a good defensive coordinator too. So I think this is somebody that's going to add not necessarily a ton of experience because he's only been coaching for 11 years, but he definitely has a ton of potential and upside. I don't believe he's 40 yet. I'm not sure when he was born. But he was under 45 because he made ESPN's 45 under 45 list a couple years ago. So I don't I believe I think he's around 40. He's either 39 or 40, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So he's a young by coaching standards coach. So that is very interesting here to get him to come here. Safety play at Boise. I don't know enough about Boise to particularly talk about their safety play, but I do I am a connoisseur of the MAC. Okay, so I have watched Ball State some over the past couple of years. And I always thought that they were a well coached defensive team. So I really like this hire. I haven't particularly had time to dig all the way into it. When I make my coaching staff video in the summer as part of the season preview series, I might dive into Tyler Stockton a little bit deeper at that point in time. But right now, uh, really good coach, excellent assistant. He's going to bring big picture thinking and understanding of defenses, as well as, I believe, excellent individual coaching for the safeties. Kerry Coombs is up next here. Obviously, former Ohio State defensive back slash special teams coach. He did a good job at Ohio State, recruited a ton of players, Marshawn Lattimore, the other kid who went in the first round to the Raiders, whose name I'm blanking on right now, other corner. He was a very, very big part of them having that ridiculous recruiting class that I think was the 2020 or the 2021 recruiting class. That was the 2021 recruiting class where they had like 7 5 stars and it was the number one class by a mile. One of the best recruiting classes in the history of like ranking services. And it worked out. You know, they never won the Big Ten, but they did win a national championship, and that's the goal. So, yeah, I did a good job. Kerry Coombs is somebody who was a uh, head coach in Ohio high school football for a very long time, has all kinds of connections, not just in Ohio, but throughout the Midwest. This is an A+ hire for me. A, because he's genuinely an elite special teams coach, as far as I'm concerned. And B, this just makes so much sense for a Midwestern program with a head coach that's never been east of the Mississippi. Okay, to hire a guy with this kind of connections that knows the area, that knows how to, recruiting and everything. Okay. Now, is Kerry Coombs going to be on the road recruiting? Probably not. I think Kerry Coombs is probably going to be a guy that spends the offseason talking with all of the coaches that he knows, all of his coaching buddies from high school, all that kind of shit, and identifying kind of which guys Michigan may or may not be interested in and at what positions. That's probably going to be Kerry Coombs's role as far as actual recruiting goes. Now, obviously, on campus, anybody can fucking recruit. So, on campus, he'll be able to come in and talk to people, and he may or may not be a positive in that way or not. But in terms of actual coaching, the one game that we've seen out of him uh coaching the special teams at Michigan, the improvement was so stupendously obvious it was kind of crazy. Okay, so like, yeah, am I making this an A+ because he's just that much better than what we had before? Fucking maybe. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, maybe, but I don't know. I think it's fine. I think he's a very, very good coach. I do like that he has all these connections into the Midwest. I think that he is an interesting hire because he was at Ohio State. But I think that he is very much going to be a very good special teams coordinator. And that's really the only thing I'm all that interested in. Okay. Uh, he, again, does have extensive connections in the Midwest, which makes him smart to keep around and stuff like that. But as far as his actual organizational importance, I think that, by the way, I just remembered the other corner. I was talking about Garyon Conley. I just remembered his name. I don't know why I just remembered his name, but I did. Nevertheless, I actually think Kerry Coombs is as a recruiter a massive positive for this team. Okay, and I think this is a signal that Kyle Whittingham is very serious about recruiting the Midwest. Okay, because he did talk about how we're going to try to lock down the state of Michigan. He did say that in his when he went on an interview. I think it was Dave Portnoy when he said that. I didn't really want to watch it because it was Dave Portnoy, but that doesn't matter. Um, I just I remember seeing at least somewhere. I do remember seeing him talk about how they're really going to put a focus on recruiting the state of Michigan and the Midwest. And this signals to me that he's actually serious about that. About actually recruiting in the state of Michigan, about recruiting in the Midwest and becoming the maybe not the dominant program, because Ohio State will always be the dominant program, but maybe the 1B to Ohio State, so to speak, because I think this is, from a big picture standpoint, maybe the best move he made. Okay, because not only through the connections and all that other kind of stuff, but also he's just an excellent special teams coach. Okay, like he just is. It's just the reality of the situation. All right. So I do believe this was one of his best moves. This was one of Kyle Whittingham's best moves in uh allowing Kerry Coombs to stick around. It also kind of just would have been a dick move if you fired a guy after he got hired like 2 weeks before. But it's not his fault that Sharon Moore decided to, do what he did. Next and final individual coach we're going to be talking about here, Doug Elacia, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He is the strength and conditioning coach. And strength and conditioning coaches are more than just strength and conditioning. You see, most people, when they talk about strength and conditioning coaches, they think about strength and conditioning, and more importantly, they think about injury prevention, which is not particularly the role of the strength and conditioning coach, but that's just a conversation for a different time. That's a whole bag of weeds that I don't need to get into at this moment, because it's almost like they employ an entire health staff and an entire preventative care staff, but that most teams do in the NFL. They absolutely do. But that doesn't matter. Doug Eliasa has been at Utah almost as long as Kyle Whittingham. He was the year after Kyle Whittingham. He came into Utah the year after Kyle Whittingham was hired as the head coach. So he was at Utah for 20 years. Okay. So he has a lot of experience as the head of a strength and conditioning program. Okay. Doug Eliasa is a I don't know about, he's a very good strength and conditioning coach. I mean, there are a couple of genuinely elite guys. Michigan had one of them, but unfortunately Jim Harbaugh took him to the NFL. So I there are some genuinely elite guys. I don't think that Eliesa is in that conversation. However, he has done a very good job at developing raw athletes. Okay, because when typically a strength and conditioning coach, you look at them and you say, "Oh, okay, do you put on weight? Do you get faster? Do you get more coordinated? That kind of thing." And that is typically the actual role of a strength and conditioning coach. Injury prevention, like if you're taking care of your body and you're working out the way you're supposed to, and you're doing whole body workouts as opposed to specialized workouts, you're hypothetically going to get less injuries, but I'm not particularly sure that matters a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. I think it's more so about health and just honestly luck. Injuries are just luck most of the time, in my opinion, but it doesn't matter. I think this is something that is a good pull even beyond just being a good strength and conditioning coach. Okay, which Michigan's previous coach, whose name I don't remember, was very young. He was the assistant to Ben Herbert before he left for the Chargers. So they kind of just kept him around for continuity, but he's very young, and he didn't do as good a job as Ben Herbert, but there was always going to be a drop off going from him to her to the new guy. So yeah, but I think he's better than him? I don't know, but I think he's certainly going to be more consistent. He definitely has a better track record than the other guy. But that's all of that aside, this is a good hire, a very good hire potentially. All right. I don't know about great, but beyond even just the strength, as I was saying before I got sidetracked, beyond even just the strength and conditioning aspect of this, from a culture perspective, which is very often what the strength and conditioning coach is actually doing, the thing that people don't talk about, but they talk about the injuries, which I don't particularly think the strength and conditioning coach is responsible for, but they don't talk about something that I do think the strength and conditioning coach is responsible for, and that's the culture of the program. If you are a tough program, it is because your strength and conditioning coach has helped you become a tough football program. Okay. If your workouts are just as hard in the off season as your practices, or harder than your practices during the season, yeah, that's a good thing. A very good thing, even potentially. So I think this is a very good hire. I don't particularly know a whole lot about his actual ability to develop people or not, but I do have somebody that I may or may not reach out to and talk to about him, see if he knows anything about that. But that is that for everything else. Let's go ahead and move on to the final segment. So the last thing I want to do before I get into the outro and stuff is that I just want to circle back to the beginning of this video and talk about Kyle Whittingham again, and kind of just explain my A- grade a little bit more. Okay. So first off, I gave him a B+ as an initial reaction. So upon further inspection, the coaching staff being what he's done in the portal so far, which has been good, retaining players, getting a punter, kicker, long snapper, all good moves. We're in the conversation for some big time portal commits as well, potentially. Okay. All of that leads me to being an A- as this grade. Okay. The reality of the situation is that the difference between A- and A is a very big difference. You've got to be perfect, basically, in terms of your coaching staff hire, in terms of who you're going after the portal, in terms of the vision of the program, in order to get an A. Okay. And to get an A+, I got to think you're winning national championships. Okay. So Dan Lanning is an A+ hire for Oregon. I think he's going to win a national championship at some point. Genuinely, I do. I think he's too good of a coach. I think they've got too much momentum in the program. Hell, they damn well might win a national championship this year. Okay. So Oregon is in a great shape right now as a program. And I believe that Dan Lanning will have that program winning national championship. Okay. Kyle Whittingham could very easily be a national championship coach at Michigan, assuming a couple of the guys that I'm a little bit iffy on, Micah Simon, Alex Whittingham, end up being very good coaches, which is very possible. Okay. Micah Simon could absolutely end up being, he's fucking 28 years old. He could absolutely end up being an elite wide receiver coach. Okay. Absolutely 100%. That's a definitive possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it very well could happen. Okay. Same thing with Alex Whittingham. Okay. NFL coaching, one of the best organizations in college football, one of the best organizations in the NFL with a ton of very good coaches that Alex Whittingham learned under. Could he end up being a very good, great, elite linebacker coach? Yes. I don't know yet. Okay. So there's a little bit hesitations. Okay. There's a little bit of hesitation. And again, I did mention it in the intro, but again, I'm going to put it here. He's also old. This is not a long-term solution. Part of the reason that would separate an A plus hire at a place like Michigan from an A or an A minus hire would be if you're going to be there for 20 years. Okay. So Dan Lanning is going to be there as long as he wants to be there at Oregon, for example. Okay. And that's just the reality of the situation. Okay. So that's one of the differentiating factors that could change an A to an A plus is age. Okay, it's not something that's going to hurt you, in my opinion, but it is a positive. It's an only positive type of thing. All right, so I just kind of wanted to explain the A minus grade a little bit more in depth here, and that's kind of the reasoning that I have behind it. It's just there's just it's an elite hire. Like it genuinely is. Like I don't give out A minus grades for head coaches willy nilly. Like I really like Kyle Whittingham. I think this is going to work out. Maybe year one, probably not. Now with the schedule Michigan has, and if they time their wins well, 9-3 might get them into the playoffs. That's a possibility. It's unlikely though, in my opinion. A lot of things would have to break their way in order to make the playoffs at 9-3. However, 10-2, you're in 100%, guaranteed. So if you could fuck around and maybe a couple of these teams aren't as good as we think they're going to be right now, and go 4-2 in those 6 really tough games, you're in the playoffs next year. So I don't know. I'm just saying. I do think Michigan is going to be a better team next year than they were this year. Okay. And Michigan was a pretty good team this year. Like they were one of the 25 best teams in the country this year. And I don't particularly think you can make a very strong argument that they weren't. However, I do think they're going to be better next year. I really do. They might end up being a top 15 team in the country at 8-4 because of the brutality that is their schedule for the next 2 years. It's absolutely brutal. They get Oklahoma at home and then Texas on the road. That's brutal. All right. Now, Texas will probably be starting a new quarterback at that point, but we don't know for sure, I guess. Because Arch Manning damn well might go out this year. I doubt it, though. I think he comes back for another year. Also, mainly because I don't think he'd be the first pick. I don't even think he'd be the second pick. I think he'd be the third pick. I'd probably take Dante Moore over him right now. But that's just me. And that's maybe a conversation for a different day. Nevertheless, I do think Kyle Whittingham is a fantastic hire. I know some people are going to bitch about A minus, and I don't care because it makes sense to me. And that's the point of this. So, yeah. But after all, that's just me. And what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So at this point, I'd like to ask you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe and help me to get to 900 subscribers, and go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. Just remember to be civil, because after all, what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that is that I'll see you next time.